20 years, $300 billion, 2,400 Americans dead. And when it was all over, the Taliban walked back into Kabul in 11 days. So let's ask the question nobody in Washington seemed particularly interested in answering. Was this war ever actually about winning? Most people will tell you Afghanistan failed because of bad strategy, wrong plan, corrupt partners, impossible terrain. And sure, all of that is true. But here's the thing. When you start following the money, when you look at who is getting paid, how much, and what happened to their income if the war ended, a very different picture shows up. Not a conspiracy. Nobody was sitting in a dark room twirling a mustache. Something more ordinary, and honestly, more unsettling. A system where so many people were making so much money that stopping the war became the weird option. That's what we're looking at today. Not who won, not who lost, but who was quietly doing very well, and why that matters more than anything that happened on the battlefield. Let's start with a number. During the 20 years of the Afghanistan War, the top 5 American defense contractors collected over $2 trillion in Pentagon contracts, combined across all programs. Lockheed Martin alone was averaging over $40 billion a year. To put that in perspective, that's more than the entire GDP of most countries on Earth. Per year, just one company. Now here's where it gets interesting. When the war started in 2001, defense stocks were already doing fine. But what happened next was something else entirely. The combination of Afghanistan and Iraq created what economists call a wartime demand shock, which is a fancy way of saying the government started ordering weapons, vehicles, surveillance equipment, and military services at a scale nobody had seen since World War II. Companies like Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, Boeing, General Dynamics, and Northrop Grumman watched their stock prices go in one direction for 20 years. Up. Between 2001 and 2021, Lockheed Martin's stock rose 1,400%. Raytheon's rose over 600%. Meanwhile, the broader stock market, the one most regular people invest in, went up around 200% in the same period. Defense was, financially speaking, a fantastic war. Now, and this is important, this is not an accusation against any of these companies. They were building what the government was ordering. That's how businesses work. But think about the incentive. You've got an entire industry, manufacturers, subcontractors, lobbyists, consultants, PR firms, all of whom are doing extremely well as long as the mission continues. Imagine you run a company that makes missiles. Business is booming, revenue is up, shareholders are happy. Would you call your congressman and say, hey, maybe it's time to wrap this up? Exactly. And when industries get big enough, they don't just respond to government policy, they start shaping it. But the weapons business was only part of the story. Running alongside the war was a second economy. Quieter, less dramatic, somehow even more expensive. It was called reconstruction. Between 2002 and 2021, the United States spent $143 billion rebuilding Afghanistan. Roads, schools, police forces, government buildings, power plants, farms, water systems. The Special Inspector General for Afghanistan Reconstruction, a government watchdog known as SIGAR, spent years trying to figure out where all that money went. What they found was something. Power plants were built that Afghans couldn't afford to turn on. Schools were constructed in villages with no teachers. Police officers were trained and paid, and then disappeared or switched sides. And then there was the gas station. The US government spent $43 million building a compressed natural gas station in Afghanistan. For context, almost no vehicles in Afghanistan ran on compressed natural gas. Someone approved that project. Someone signed that budget. Someone cut that ribbon at the opening ceremony. Nobody got fired. The money wasn't disappearing randomly. It was moving through a very organized system. A US agency awards a contract. An American firm wins it. They hire a subcontractor. The subcontractor hires a local Afghan middleman. The middleman takes a cut. The project gets built, or doesn't. Either way, the paperwork says completed. And then next year, the same agency gets the same budget, and the whole thing starts again. Cigar eventually published a final report. Their conclusion, after years of investigation, was roughly, everyone involved had different goals, and nobody could agree on what success even looked like. Which, when you're spending $143 billion, is a fairly significant problem. So at this point you might be wondering, why didn't any president just stop it? Great question. Every president, from Bush to Obama to Trump to Biden, faced the exact same impossible choice. If you pull the troops out and Afghanistan falls apart, that's on you. Your name is on it, forever. If you keep the troops there and nothing gets better, well, that's expensive and demoralizing, but it's slow, it's diffuse, and most voters aren't paying close attention to year 14 of a foreign war. This is what political scientists call an asymmetry of blame, which is a fancy way of saying the downside of leaving is immediate and visible. The downside of staying is gradual and easy to ignore. So everyone stayed. Obama actually ordered 30,000 more troops into Afghanistan in 2009, while simultaneously announcing a withdrawal timeline, which is a bit like telling your gym you're quitting while also buying a 12-month membership. The message was contradictory by design: signal strength to one audience, signal restraint to another. Trump signed a deal with the Taliban in 2020, the Doha Agreement. The deal involved the US agreeing to leave. In exchange, the Taliban agreed to various things. Most of those things did not happen. Biden completed the withdrawal in 2021. The Afghan government, which the US had spent 20 years and billions of dollars propping up, lasted about 11 days without American support. None of these presidents wanted to fail. They were all responding to the same broken set of incentives. Leaving meant owning the outcome. Staying meant passing the problem to the next guy. And so they passed it, again and again, for 20 years. Here's something that rarely makes the news. By 2011, there were more private contractors in Afghanistan than there were American soldiers. Let that sit for a second. I know this firsthand. I spent 4 years in Afghanistan as a government contractor, not as a soldier, as a civilian working on reconstruction programs. And what I saw on the ground was essentially two parallel worlds running at the same time. World 1, the official military mission, soldiers, strategy, operations. World 2, the contractor economy, thousands of civilians, training the Afghan army, building roads, running logistics, providing security, analyzing intelligence, managing communications, all of it outsourced, all of it billed by the day. A skilled contractor in Afghanistan could earn anywhere from $500 to over $1,000 a day. Now multiply that by 30,000 contractors. Multiply that by 365 days a year. Multiply that by 20 years. The math gets uncomfortable very quickly. And here's the part that never gets talked about enough. Those contractors worked for companies. Those companies had shareholders. Those shareholders wanted revenue. Revenue required contracts. Contracts required a mission. A mission required the war to continue. Nobody had to be corrupt for this to work. Nobody had to be evil. The system just needed to keep running, because an enormous number of people depended on it running. As the writer Upton Sinclair once put it, it's very hard to get someone to understand something when their paycheck depends on them not understanding it. He wasn't talking about Afghanistan, but he could have been. So here's the uncomfortable question underneath all of this. Could the war have been won? And if yes, What would that have actually taken? The military strategy adopted after 2006 was called counterinsurgency. The basic idea: you can't just defeat an insurgency militarily. You have to make the local government so trustworthy, so functional, so legitimate that ordinary people choose it over the rebels. Simple enough in theory. Except the Afghan government that the US was supporting was widely seen by ordinary Afghans as corrupt, incompetent, and completely dependent on foreign money to survive. Every year, a research group called the Asia Foundation surveyed ordinary Afghans about their views on their government. Every year through the 2010s, the trust numbers went down. And every year, American generals stood in front of cameras and talked about progress. In 2019, The Washington Post obtained thousands of pages of internal government interviews, later called the Afghanistan Papers. What those documents revealed was that senior officials, generals, ambassadors, cabinet members, privately knew the strategy wasn't working for years. Publicly, they talked about progress. Privately, they acknowledged the gaps. Winning would have required something the whole system was structurally unable to deliver: a decision to build Afghan institutions slowly and patiently, with less money flowing through fewer contractors over a longer period of time. That outcome was good for Afghanistan. It was not particularly good for quarterly earnings reports. So here's where we land. The Afghanistan War lasted 20 years, not because nobody noticed it wasn't working. Plenty of people noticed. It lasted because the machine that kept it running, the defense contracts, the reconstruction budgets, the political incentives, the contractor economy, was bigger and more powerful than any single person's ability to stop it. No villain required, no secret plan needed, just thousands of individually sensible decisions adding up to a collectively insane outcome. The money was real. The people getting paid were real. The soldiers who died were absolutely real. And here's the thing about systems like this. They don't only exist in foreign policy. The next time you read a headline about something that seems like it should have been fixed years ago, a broken agency, a pointless program, a crisis that never resolves, it might be worth asking one simple question: who's getting paid to keep this going? That question, more often than not, will get you further than the headline ever will. If you want to see how this same playbook gets run in a completely different arena, next time we're looking at an institution closer to home. Subscribe, and we'll keep looking beneath the headlines.